Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television platform for small businesses. Now, for the longest time, investing in a vibrant startup has been perceived as an activity that's exclusive and reserved for the elite few. But has the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic leveled the playing field? Is startup investing now more inclusive, more effective, less expensive than ever before? Well, the jury is still out on that, but to tackle the topic, I'm joined by a very special guest on the show tonight, the co-founder and chief operating officer of Oddup, Jackie Lam. Jackie, thank you for joining us.
Hello, Pooja. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here with you.
Now, Jackie, under normal circumstances, determining the current and future valuation of a startup is incredibly difficult as it is. What are the new challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic has added to this equation?
Yes, Pooja, you're right. The valuation is probably one of the most discussed items in the startup world by startup founders and startup investors alike. Valuation is always of interest, and the recent pandemic, I think, has really hit at a number of valuations so significantly that we're all talking about it. If you look at Oddup, if you go online to Oddup, you can see that a number of valuations of some significant startups has dropped and lowered. And this is purely because of the impact that the pandemic has had on the startup. I think now no one is investing in startups, and if anyone is, they have a huge appetite for risk, or they really do see a significant upside going forward in the next quarter or so.
Well, in your view, what essentially will then enable smart startup investing? The sector cannot come to a grinding halt, right? The show must always go on. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So when is that, and how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I think now that restrictions are starting to lift and so forth, there is more and more activity. But the savvy startup founder hasn't been quiet or silent in the past 2 or 3 months. I mean, I know of many founders who have been working diligently, vigilantly, and tirelessly over the past few months, trying to really look at their business model, looking at their startup, making tweaks, making the necessary but sometimes painful changes as well in order to keep their business going. And the light at the end of the tunnel is that their business is probably going to be better even going forward. So these changes that myself, my co-founder, and other founders have made will have longer lasting impacts. The pandemic has crept up on us so suddenly, right? No one had time to really think, but it was an immediate reaction to, okay, what do we need to do to survive? And now that we've had time, we're now thinking, what do we need to do? What are the changes we need to do to our business model in order to sustain even longer in the event another pandemic happens or a crash happens or anything like that out of our control happens? We've now had time to really think, make the tweaks, build the technology we needed to in order to then go forward.
So for a lot of entrepreneurs that are essentially deciding between whether to scale down, whether to sell off, or in fact, whether to shut shop, if they were to come to you for guidance, how would you help them navigate that decision?
Yeah, if they were to come to me for guidance, my suggestion to them would be to not shut down entirely. I mean, they've worked so hard to bring their startup to wherever they are at the moment. My advice to them would be to look at the unnecessary expenses that are dragging the business down, right? What don't you really need? Can you operate in a different way? Can you work from home? Can you work remotely? So looking at all these things that will bring down the expenses, but continue the business as usual model. So looking at really sustaining viability, and you may have heard of a term called the minimal viable organization. So now a lot of startup founders are looking at really reorganizing their business to be exactly that.
And I want to touch on a point you brought up earlier, which is startups really seem to be struggling and straddling between whether to be back in business full throttle or brace themselves for the second wave. What words of advice would you have for a startup in that position?
I think it depends on what startup you really are. If you are an e-commerce startup, a delivery startup, a tech startup, and this pandemic has actually been the thing that makes your revenue spike or really has projected and given you a vision of, hey, actually our market really is here, then you've got to be building the technology around your startup to be buffering for the masses, the volume that is to come. If you are a startup in, say, a different space, maybe one that is not e-commerce or one that is not tech, but perhaps one that is service-oriented, that's a tough space to be in. Any service-oriented startup will have been hit badly purely because of the lockdown and the restrictions. To that, I would be saying, look at your model again. Is this a service that people and customers really want, or is it a nice to have? A nice to have then really is a tough spot to be in.
Jackie, many analysts predict that industry consolidation will be a natural byproduct of the coronavirus outbreak. Some industries may essentially have to take a back seat while others may emerge resilient. What sort of consolidation do you anticipate going forward across industry verticals?
I think a significant consolidation is the medtech space. I mean, you see technology really taking the forefront, and right? There are apps out there that are now trying to track who is asymptomatic or who has been near someone with COVID-19. So any data and technology app that can potentially predict outbreaks, clusters, and so forth, again, will succeed very well. We've also seen a number of the medical technology really move and adapt quite quickly to changing from face-to-face medical consultancies to telehealth or over the line or over the app medical consultation. So any app in that space that will then bridge the gap that restrictions have brought down or lockdown restrictions have brought will really thrive there. And I think data is really something that everyone is needing, starting from the angel investor to the large banks to the large data houses. And now that events and significant conferences and so forth have been cancelled and are not foreseeably opening up in the near future, data will continue to be really sought after.
The Oddup platform, of course, aside from scoring startups, also provides sector-wide level trends across geographies. So what are the sectors that are piquing the interest of investors in the midst of this COVID-19 outbreak?
I think fintech has always been a sector that is very interesting to all investors, and it has continued to peak. So looking at fintech, the fintech sector, and also the blockchain, and how these two then morph and merge. And continuously, the blockchain will continue to be seen not only in technology, but in the big banks. A lot of the big fintechs and the financial services companies are looking at integrating blockchain into their IT and technology. So that sector continues to be a space to watch. I think many large companies will be adopting blockchain tools and blockchain technologies to help their tech.
Now, the innovative blockchain use cases across industry and the startup ecosystem in particular have truly mushroomed. What are some of the use cases that have taken you perhaps most by surprise?
I think financial innovation always surprises me. Using the blockchain to do finance is fascinating to me and brings up, crypto. If you speak to someone about crypto or cryptocurrency, say 5 years ago, everyone would be wondering what that is or have a question mark. But now there is significant interest in digital assets, cryptocurrency being one of them, and then the blockchain enabling them. So this is a space where people will continue to look at and will continue to be investing in. It is a very, very volatile space to be in. So the more information, again, back to square one, the more information you can get as any investor, the better it will be going forward. There is still huge amounts of excitement to be part of the startup culture. By no way, I think, has COVID-19 dampened that excitement or enthusiasm, or in fact, with so many layoffs and redundancies by the large corporates, many of the younger entrepreneurs are looking at starting up their own startup or looking at their own business and seeing how they can take this and expand and grow.
Do you believe that investors and entrepreneurs alike are beginning to warm up to the idea of fundraising via the cryptocurrency medium, or do you sense that there's still some resistance to that out in the market?
I think if you are a pure crypto startup, then you're very savvy with getting crypto as a fundraising mechanism. If you are more bricks and mortar or a more traditional startup, then that startup founder will still continue to want fiat as part of the fundraising or as part of the fundraise. There are many ways that a founder can be creative in the ways they fundraise, and crypto is just one of them. There's a lot of advisory stock that goes out. There's all sorts of ways that one can be creative with.
And one of the most, rewarding aspects of being a startup is the access to mentorship. That essentially draws a lot of the youth culture towards the industry to begin with, because they feel that they'll have that access and they can maximize their career trajectory and their career graph and, essentially take control of their career in perhaps a way that they wouldn't be able to do if they were to take on a more service-oriented traditional path. So that said, do you believe that the appetite for the next generation, Generation Y and Generation Z, to join the startup sector is now dampened as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak? Or does it continue to hold strong?
Oh, I think there is still huge amounts of excitement to be part of the startup culture. By no way, I think, has COVID-19 dampened that excitement or enthusiasm, or in fact, with so many layoffs and redundancies by the large corporates, many of the younger entrepreneurs are looking at starting up their own startup or looking at their own business and seeing how they can take this and expand and grow. I think as a startup founder, an essential part of the growth process is, as you say, to get a mentor, someone who has experienced that, someone who has the scars to prove it, someone who has taken A and transformed it to B. So I think, number one, this pandemic has really made people think outside the box more, look at different businesses that would thrive more in such an environment. And B, there are many mentors as well who are looking to then have a mentee, have numbers of startups to be a mentor to.
And it's been said that startups are, of course, inherently agile. They can reevaluate and tweak their business model, sometimes on the fly. So that said, I think the question becomes, when is it the right time for startups to pivot? That is something they very much struggle with. When do you hold them and when do you fold them? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think agility is one of the key attractions of a startup. There is that ability purely because of the size of a startup when compared to a corporate enterprise or a large organization. So the agility to pivot is attractive, and while it may be attractive, you need to very carefully time when you're going to pivot. As Oddup has grown, we've always asked the question, what is our product market fit? Are we creating something that the market actually wants, right? Are we creating something that the market actually needs? And are we able to create that and then blend the two? So you've got a market on one hand and you've got Oddup on the other hand, what is the product market fit? And as we grew, we also then pivoted from being a purely research and analytics company to then a data analytics and a tech company. So there are significant ways and timing of when is best to pivot. And sometimes it's not that obvious. It does take time and a lot of listening to the customer, a lot of listening to feedback from customers and also from investors and advisors as well.
Now, many entrepreneurs in the startup space, unknowingly make the mistake of essentially falling in love with their own product without necessarily putting it through the proof of concept phase in the marketplace. So at what stage does the entrepreneur need to perhaps look a little less inwards and a bit more outwards to ensure they're on the right track?
Yeah, every founder and their startup, the startup is the founder's baby, right? So it's going to be tough to pull that away. I think founders who are able to then step outside that realm and look at it from a third-party point of view really does have the advantage. And it's tough. It's like an inventor who has invented the next greatest thing. And asking that inventor to really, look at it with a new pair of glasses. It's not easy. I think that's where your mentors and your advisors really need to be strong and solid in giving feedback and in giving critical feedback. I think advisors who are able to do that will help the startup founder significantly more into looking at the business model from an actual viable business to a pet project.
Startups always seem to be in search of a differentiation strategy, but that inherently contradicts the fact that many Me Too players have gone on to achieve tremendous success. So how does an entrepreneur strike the right balance?
Yeah, as a co-founder of a startup myself, I don't necessarily believe that being a pioneer in a new space is necessarily that great. I mean, there are many minefields that a pioneer needs to navigate in order to succeed. So as you say, some of the Me Too's have gone on to do even better than the pioneer purely because there have been lessons learned. There have been mistakes made and lessons learned. So, we try not to invent the wheel too much at Oddup as well. And we try then to rather, refine the wheel rather than reinvent it. And I think those startups that are able to do so and then market themselves very well will succeed.
Now, you're of course a serial and seasoned entrepreneur yourself, but does someone in your position stay up late at night due to the competition? Or is the competition essentially a factor that you've externalized, learned to live with, and your focus is more inwards on building a solid product?
I stay up at night because of the startup, not because of anything else. So as a COO, my job is really to glue everything together. And with the startup, there's just so much to do. You've got your product, you've got financing, you've got people/HR, you've got marketing, you've got all these areas to oversee, to manage, and so forth. So all these different aspects play into I guess what being a co-founder is and running a startup is. Competition is out there. It will always be out there. And, healthy competition is great as well. But for me, what keeps me up is just the sheer volume of work.
All right. And Jackie, before we let you go, any words of advice you might have to the budding entrepreneurs that are a member of our audience, a member of our viewership, who are perhaps a bit confused at this juncture with respect to what to do next?
Yeah, I think if you're a budding entrepreneur and you have got that heart and desire to go and start something, then go for it. There's really nothing stopping you at this present time. Get someone, do it with someone, don't do it alone because it can get a little bit lonely at times. So do it with someone who has a similar vision as you and get some feedback along the way as well via mentors, advisors, and so forth.
All right. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Pooja.